Do I have a seconder for this motion? That is my motion. Councillor Summers.
You don't need a second nominee. It's a
It's
notice.
actually a motion.
It is.
It's not a mayoral minute, it's a notice of motion.
I have put this motion forward because it is an occupational health and safety issue. And as a responsible person, I have gone down the track of actually looking at what we actually have in place. We currently don't have a policy. And I've actually been through the process of what the police can do, which is little without a clear policy. And the E-Safety Commissioner advice is in regards to the fact that all business has a responsibility of having a process in place to actually support staff. Oh, you can't hear it. It's echoing on this end. Can't hear me. So I have proposed this motion to put together a policy that is responsive to social media postings that target council members and staff, and that the policy be based on the following principles. Now, I put together these principles as per the E-Safety Commissioner process, and the wording in regard to threaten, intimidate, harass, humiliate, slander or defame and troll actually comes from the E-Safety Commissioner website. It has a clear process of what we can actually do to follow, but we actually need to be reporting to the E-Safety Commissioner. We also need to take account of the fact that social media account administrators who enable these social media posts that undertakes these actions of threatening, intimidate, harass, humiliate, slander, defame or troll, SnowyMonaro staff contact with all councillors been requested to immediately remove such posts. Now that is happening at this moment, but it's not consistent. And I have gone through the process of these principles to give some guidance as to what I think the policy should actually include. And part C is that SnowyMonaro Council submit a motion to the November 2023 New South Wales Local Government Conference supporting stronger laws and protection for council staff and councillors from online abuse. Now, there's a webinar on the 31st of August by Local Government New South Wales in regard to this issue. I've also contacted Local Government New South Wales in regard to this issue, and the advice from the President has been to go to the E-Safety Commissioner, and also to that the fact that it's a huge concern among a number of councillors, but there isn't a process in place around policy development, and the fact that if this was in print media or in visual media like TV and radio, that we have very clear laws, but under the social media platform, those laws are not as clear cut. So in regards to the fact that we need to provide a work environment for our staff and also all the people who work within council, I'm proposing that we establish a policy. Councillor Summers, do you wish to speak to?
Yes, thank you. I think this is an important step forward, and note that the resolution is in relation to establishing a policy, and the principles from the Commissioner give us some guidance as to how that might be developed. Communication types have changed. As the Mayor mentioned, there are laws in place for some electronic media, but social media is taking some time for the regulations to catch up. It's not about stifling speech or stifling dissent. It is about reducing abuse, and I have some sterling examples of electronic abuse that I have received, and staff members are also suffered severe distress from actions meted out to them. There is no reason for us to defend or countenance really poor behaviour by certain individuals who go way beyond promoting their view to stooping to abuse and slander and the rest of it. And it is really a behavioural issue that we are trying to mitigate, not stifling dissent, not stifling free speech, as some would have it. It is a responsibility of ours to protect the staff from this. As councillors, we probably knew we were lining up for some of this when we put up our hands, probably not the extent to what we have received or the absolute crassness that's been delivered. But for staff, it is completely unfair that they should be subjected to some of the foul and rude behaviour that others have meted on them. And I couldn't recommend this more strongly, and noticing that it is to establish a policy and that we will be involved in that development and saying yay or nay to it when it has been developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Summers. Do I have a speaker against the motion?
Question mark. Madam Chair, I gather this will be going through our solicitors, etc., to make sure that it's all encompassed.
Yes, to establish a policy. So all the things I should put up some principles. It's not to say the principles are actually going to be put in place, but it gives the council staff guidance in regard to what it could cover and the essential parts. The E-Safety Commissioner provides reasonable guidance in regard to this, and the WorkSafe are also providing guidance, and they're coming to council on the 31st of August as well to provide a session to staff and any interested councillors on our responsibilities in regard to this type of work safety issue and what are the responsibilities of the employers.
Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
I fully concur with the intent of this motion, and I think that staff and councillors do have the right to work in a safe environment and not to be subject to bullying and harassment, whether that's in person, in print, on social media. There's absolutely no question. And the suggestion that people in the roles such as ours should have greater fortitude and not being able to cope would be our problem and not the problem of the person who is delivering the abuse is intolerable. However, I'm slightly concerned with the content and the wording of this particular motion, and I would like to foreshadow an alternate motion, if I may. And that would be that council acknowledge that staff and councillors have a right to expect a safe work environment. I think it's a given, but it's important to be stated. And that council work with Safe Work Australia to undertake the policy gap analysis, to develop and update policies, to provide guidance and protection, to ensure the wellbeing and safeguarding of all staff. And then the point C from the original motion I feel should stand. That SnowyMonaro Regional Council submit a motion to the November 2023 New South Wales Local Government Conference supporting stronger laws and protection for council staff and councillors from online abuse. The reason for the foreshadowed motion is that whilst the principles as laid out in the original motion may indeed be the content that does end up in the policy, I think it's possibly a level of detail that we oughtn't be discussing at this point. Might be something slightly different that we end up having in the policy. So I'd like to, with the strongest possible voice, state that this is something that is important and needs to be developed as a policy. But there are legal ramifications and financial ramifications. There's quite a lot that I feel needs to be thought through and work with other councils, with local government New South Wales, and with Safe Work Australia to develop policy which actually will give guidance and protection and provide a safe environment for all of us.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Do I have another speaker for the motion on the board? No other speakers for? Oh, Councillor Mitchell.
We are just talking about establish a policy. It's to be talked about. It's not actually what the wording is. I mean, and I think this is, to me, this is really like the early stages of the domestic violence policy. I mean, people were always saying that you're not ever going to get that up because you can't prove anything. But crikey, this is really important, and our staff and our councillors are suffering from this, and I just don't think it should happen. And we should be putting up very strong argument that it should not happen, and we should be leading the Facebook or that venue of discussion is very new, and it's and how we talk on that is yet to be properly defined. And I think as the leaders in this community, we should be saying that it is just not acceptable to be abusing people in any form. And that's what this motion does. We should not be abusing people.
Thank you. Do I have a speaker against?
Not at all, sort of against it, Madam Mayor, that I acknowledge what Councillor Mitchell said there, and mainly I'm talking about councillors here, that we should not be trying to restrict people with their views.
Absolutely.
This has, unfortunately, I think this is the wrong way about going about it. We've got a local government association that it should be brought through that level down to here. We've got a state government that with state parliamentarians. There's people out there that don't put their opinion right and abusive, and we should not condone that, and I will not condone that. But I've had a couple of texts from people that normally wouldn't worry about this, that read this resolution in the business papers and were very concerned about it, because sometimes they voice their opinion against councillors. They don't want to be restricted against that, and note that they do it respectively. And that's, I'm just concerned, especially with the how that resolution was presented. It will create more tension between councillors, council staff, and our community. We've got to work as a team and bring people along. You don't always agree, I can assure you of that. And people react differently to it. But generally, and for a fair while, people will come around. They've got different ways of presentation. When they get abusive, and the only thing that I probably don't get as involved in this sort of business, because I'm not part of social media, I haven't got to that level yet. But I do acknowledge that we've got to bring in something to help the staff if there is bad social media on. But we've got ways of doing that. It should be done through our state OLG, Office of Local Government, and at that level and working down, and done with the whole of New South Wales Council, as well as probably the state government. I think bringing an independent policy in to this organisation is fraught with danger and a lot of cost, and you're going to push your community away from you instead of bringing your community with you. And those rogues that carry on, the community will push them aside too. Don't worry about that, and they will. And they show no respect to them, and they do that. So we tread very carefully here. I think Councillor Hopkins' way that she sort of headed might be the best way, but I do believe it's got to go into the Office of Local Government before we try to make any independent decision on council, because I just believe we're not working with our community properly. We support our staff, and we should, and we do, and the community, 99% of the community respect our staff, which they do. You'll always get, and you'll never cover it. And just have a mechanism in there to minimise that. But there was just that recommendation is probably could cause more trouble than it's worth, in my view.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Do we have another speaker for the recommendation? Speaker against? Councillor Higgins.
Hi, I'd like to speak for the recommendation. This, as has been stated, I've noticed that the words are those of the E-Safety Commissioner. They are also principles. So this is not what we're voting in. We're just saying that we're going to need a strategy. And I think this is a very, we shouldn't be afraid of being on the front foot on this if that's what is occurring. But I suspect this is happening everywhere because this is a growing problem. I think it's a very positive step because the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And I think the community would hold us in high regard for taking a stand on this, and it makes it a safer place for those people who are not interested in threatening and intimidating and trolling for them to participate in our communications and in our democracy, which is really important. For those people who are quite able to regulate themselves, they're not going to have a problem. They can still express their opinions. Opinions are very, very welcome. This is very specific about targeting people personally, and not keeping to the issues that are being discussed. So that is why I'll be voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Do I have a speaker against? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I speak against the motion. There's a few reasons why. First and foremost, it's not obviously the role of local government to regulate public commentary, whether it's on social media or anywhere else. And I think before we go any further with this, we should raise our concerns regarding the tone of social media commentary with the Attorney General of New South Wales and the Minister for Local Government. If we act unilaterally, and other councils did so too, we would simply end up with a hodgepodge of policy across the state. So before we go further, I would first and foremost urge that we seek advice from the Chief Legal Officer of the state as to whether we should go ahead and how we might, and whether or not the state government indeed has any plans to develop this space in the near future. Equally, we should contact the Minister for Local Government and seek their authorisation to go ahead with a policy like this. As councillors know, over the last few days, I reached out to some of the community for feedback on this. I did it through social media. It was actually quite a civil engagement. Outside of social media, I received many telephone calls. I had people come to my home and sit down over a cup of tea and talk about this. Then got one of them to transplant raspberries for me, which was an added bonus. What I can tell you out of that is that there is no consensus position on the community that I could identify on this. Some people are vehemently opposed to council doing this. Some people are incredibly supportive of council moving in this direction. The vast majority of people were wondering why we were doing it all. And that's why in the email I sent to the author of the motion, I asked a number of questions, including some data to help inform this. I think rather than act prematurely, let's collect some data, let's get some advice from the Attorney General and from the Minister of Local Government around what this might be, whether it's our domain to do it, whether the state government's going to do it for us, and all those related things. So let's acknowledge the intent that the author has discussed in doing this as a great intent. But let's take time, let's get advice, and if we move forward, let's do it right. Specifically in regards to item E, There was quite a lot of confusion in the community members I spoke to as to why council would want to restrict independent reporting and streaming of council events. A number of questions around what legal basis we would have to do so. And also in my email pertaining to where a recorder may be positioned at the time that they do the recording, for example. So there's a lot of unknowns there. But most importantly, given the small scale of recording devices and the nature of the events that we hold, it's almost impossible to enforce. And how indeed would we enforce such a policy in the event that we caught someone filming? Or if in fact they published the content, would we be able to enforce copyright infringement and so forth? So there's a whole range of legal matters there that I think we need to seek advice upon before we could, settle on a policy. But most importantly, the suggestion that came to me is, why don't we just film all of our events and publish them and webcast it anyhow? It's quite cheap to do so. And if we simply did that, then other people wouldn't need to do it at all. We do it for this meeting. Well, why don't we do it for other consultation meetings we're seeking? So I don't understand point E. I don't understand why the author of the motion has suggested that we require permission to do that. But equally, I don't see how it's actually a practical measure for all the reasons I've said. And the counterpoint put to me, which I think is quite a sensible one, is why don't we simply film those events and publish the content ourselves? And there won't be any need for someone to independently film. So for those reasons, I'm voting against the motion as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Are there other speakers for the motion? If not, I take into account all of the comments made today. However, I have put this up as a safe work issue. We can go to the Attorney General and we can go to the Minister of Health. But in our current present situation where staff have been abused, they have been put in a position where they have not felt safe at work or in the workplace out in the community, and we have no policy that actually gives them any sort of direction as to what they can do, we are responsible. And I have been in my former life in that position as a responsible officer. As a person who works in this environment, and I have seen this situation happen to staff and to fellow councillors, it is not acceptable and is not considered appropriate within the Safe Work Act and definitions. The East Safety Commissioner, and if you look at the website, is very clear about what is acceptable and what's not acceptable on social media. However, the laws are very, very weak. And that's why I put Part C in this motion, because we need to come together. But at the end of the day, safe work, if this ever goes to a complaint by staff to Safe Work, the first thing they will ask us is, where is your policy? And we do not have a policy at the moment. We do not have a policy that guides us as to how we would address these issues. And I put principles in there. The staff will look at the principles and they'll come back and say whether they're reasonable or not, or whether they are workable or not. However, it's about establishing a policy that allows our staff and other persons who work within council to have a clear, understood process of what they can work in. And I have spoken with both the HR manager, spoken to local government New South Wales, I've spoken to the police about what we need to do, and we need to have a very clear process, and at the moment we do not have that. Thank you. With that, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour of the motion as it is on the board. Councillors Summers, Mitchell, Beard, Davis, Higgins and Johnson and Hannah. Thank you. All those against? Stewart, Frolic, Hopkins and Williamson, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. Motion passed. Is that end of our agenda? And we close this meeting at 2:56. Thank you very much for your attendance, public gallery, and to